Let's go. Episode 2, Summer Ball. All things college football conversation coming your way with the big brains from here at Fox Sports, The Gambler. Hello, everybody. Sean Brace with you again. And I thought episode 1 was great, and I look forward to continuing over the next few weeks talking all things college football. But this time around, we're going to do it a little focus. And tonight, the creme de la creme, I think. I know that we got everything being all jumbled up as far as realignment. We covered that in its totality in episode 1, but I'll still think that the SEC is the best conference of them all when it comes to college football. Allow me to go around the room first before we dive right into the conversation. Joining us, our returning champion, the one and only Mr. Joe Tansey. Joe, how we doing, sir?
What am I the returning champion of? Am I like the NCAA's corporate champion? Is that what I am? I haven't won anything here.
No, you're right. I don't know.
I appreciate the kind words. I'm not gonna say don't ever call me champion again. But
the returning champion on Jeopardy is the last, not the first. It's the last announcement or the last introduction. So yeah,
didn't you win the bowl challenge last year?
Sure didn't.
I think you did because I came in second.
No, the belt's out in Vegas.
Dustin. Oh no, you were the okay. Yeah, you.
I went on an incredible heater during bowl season. Yes, that was definitely a thing. But I did not win. I am not a champion yet, but I appreciate the intro.
And we're not talking bowls tonight. That's for damn sure. All right, we got a long way to go until we get to bowl season. All right, joining us, Ryan Beef Coyle. I caught him in his glory down there at the Kenny Chesney concert. I called him Beef Lombardi as he was giving a pep talk to his friends there in the parking lot tailgate area. Beef, how we doing today, sir?
Good, and fitting day for the SEC scheduled episode because they announced the rest of the games today times. So we're fully locked and loaded on some of these SEC games. I'm headed down to Tennessee, Kentucky this year. That got announced as a night game. So looking forward to it and getting into this whole episode.
That's a banger of a game right there. And that game's at Rocky Top?
Yep, at November. So it's, getting towards playoff push at that time as well.
You better very Parka too at night up in the mountains.
Yeah, baby. That's what I'm talking about. And also joining us, he is live from a beautiful hotel room in Baltimore. It's our good friend, Mark Henry Jr., of course, host of the Tough Cover Radio Show every Saturday right here on The Gambler at 11 a.m. Mark, how we doing?
I'm doing well. I'm actually in Annapolis. I wouldn't stay probably in Baltimore generally. So I try to stay on the,
I actually have a bachelor party in Baltimore in like 3 weeks. Are you telling me I should probably go somewhere else? Is that what you're?
No. You can find nice spots, but yeah. I'm also
looks good on you. Okay.
Nice yeah.
All right.
I'm right by the Navy campus. What's their win total? 3.5, 4.5? Where are they at?
It's a good question. We'll have to dig that one up. All right. Let me ask you right from the jump, Mark. I'll start with you you just have the microphone right now. Is right now the SEC the best conference in college football still?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when the team that kind of took down the SEC last year, in some ways at least beat Alabama and then won the national championship. Harbaugh left. That team is probably going to take a step back. Just another one of the non-SEC powerhouses probably off the board or at least diminished a little bit. So, yeah, I think the SEC is still absolutely the class. Now, that doesn't mean that the Big Ten is that far behind. But it's definitely SEC or Big Ten, and I think the SEC gets the nods. And I think a big part of the reason is going through the exercise, going through best quarterback of each conference. It's way harder to pick in the SEC just because there's way more options. You go to the Big Ten, doesn't feel like there's as many options. So I really do think it's the quarterback play that sets apart the SEC from the Big Ten. A lot of returning studs.
Ryan Coyle, do you agree with that statement? SEC still above all?
Yeah, looking at the overall SEC now with the expansion, I think they'll have 4 of the top 10 teams once the first poll comes out. So probably at least 1 and 3. I think Texas will probably come in at 3, Ohio State at 2, Georgia at 1. Probably is what we're looking at. And then I think Ole Miss will be in the top 10, and I think Bama's going to be close. I think Bama's going to be either 9 or 10 or 11, but yeah, they're still the top dog for now. But I'm big on Ohio State this year, but I'm sure we'll get into that eventually.
All right. And Joe, we will open up with question number 1, and you're going to talk a little bit about the SEC here. And of course, we're going to discuss some of the teams that maybe we expect to take a jump, have the success that they had last year, maybe build off of that. We're also going to discuss some teams that we think could very well come up short from expectations. We are going to hit on the best quarterback. We also have some bold predictions coming your way. But Joe, let's go ahead and get right into it. Question number 1, as far as the SEC is concerned, and I think I speak for all college football, just, average fans here, Georgia's been dominant, and they were dealt a tough hand last year by not getting the opportunity to compete after the season that they had. They lost a tough SEC championship game to Alabama. We understand what took place, but all eyes continue to remain on Georgia, correct? Is it all about Georgia continuing their dominance over the past few seasons and righting what they got wrong last year, and obviously getting it done, finishing the season, winning it all? And things change now with the playoffs, but there's some unfinished business in the Bulldogs' mind. Is that where we're at right now with Georgia?
I mean, Beef just said it. Texas is probably going to be a top 5 team. Remember, they're in the SEC now. Like, it's very hard to match the overall consistency that Georgia's had. And I think Texas, even though they've been very good and are climbing to that point, they're still not there yet, right? I mean, Sam Ehlinger told us Texas was back how many years ago, and they're still not back. But I think if this was the year, this is the year to do it for Texas, because Bama's in year 1 of a new regime. There's going to be the inevitable kind of ebbs and flows under Kalen DeBoer. I don't foresee it being completely perfect. I don't know if the Brian Kelly project at LSU is going to kind of reap dividends, at least to LSU's lofty standards. And Ole Miss is a perpetual, number 2, number 3 team in the SEC. I mean, divisions don't exist, but they've been number 2 to Alabama how many years, or number 3 to Alabama and LSU. And they're perfectly okay with being number 3 in the SEC, because that probably gets them a home playoff game. So I think if you look at Georgia's realistic challengers, I think there's only one, and it's Texas. And I think they're a very good challenger. And if you compare the SEC and the Big Ten, look, we're going to be talking about Georgia and Ohio State and Texas all year. Well, 2 of those schools from the SEC, one's from the Big Ten, and 2 of the top 5 programs in the Big Ten are going through regime changes as well. One of them because of Alabama. So, look, yeah, you could say if you want, Georgia is the team to beat, because I think that's a fair statement. But I think it's probably going to be a lot more of a 2-horse race than we expect between Georgia and Texas, based off of what we've seen so far from the Longhorns under Sark. And then I think there's going to be a drop-off to whoever 3 is. Not too far, but I think there's a very clear established hierarchy in the SEC.
As there has been, so it shouldn't surprise me. But I was hopeful that, we were going to get some more competitive teams this year in the SEC with the change. And you did bring up
it's still going to be competitive.
Yeah, well,
I mean, look, these teams are still going to lose probably 1 or 2 games, and we're going to debate about it. Yeah, it's not like Georgia and Texas are walking through here. I mean, the SEC is going to be incredibly competitive, because that 3. I mean, how many teams do you want to lump in that second tier? Because that's going to be where a lot of the drama is, and that's where it's been. I mean, let's be honest. In years where Bama's been dominant, in years where Georgia's been dominant, the second tier teams, your Tennessees, your Floridas, South Carolina slips in there, Mizzou slips in there sometimes, LSU is always in the mix. Like, these teams are still going to be very, very good. But I think in terms of, I mean, what's your definition of competitive? Competing with Georgia and Texas each week? Maybe not, but I think it's going to be the most competitive conference in the country by a mile.
I would like some upsets. I don't want to see what Mark Henry Jr. texted us 2 nights ago by saying, well, for what it's worth, and it's very little what he said, but he went through every team and went through and gave them all a record. And at the top, he has Georgia undefeated. So Mark Henry Jr., over to you, 12-0 here. I do have Georgia's schedule in front of me. Clemson opening up with. You got Alabama on the 28th. That's in Alabama. You got Texas on the road in Texas. You got a game against Florida. There's no expectations there, but somewhat of a rivalry, right? Ole Miss in there, Tennessee at the end. Watch out for UMass. I kid. 12-0 though for you, Mark Henry Jr. Why are you so sold on Georgia this year?
I think they're going to come back angry, especially with not being able to defend their title. Not that that's really the deciding factor. I'm a huge Carson Beck guy. I think you could make a case he's a top 3 quarterback in the country. I really think he's going to kind of cement himself as one of the best quarterbacks in the country, even in terms of the draft, potentially going into next year. But they also return just a ton of guys. Like, if you look at the all-SEC preseason first team, it's a whole lot of Bulldogs on there. Like, it's just all over the defensive side of the ball. You have Nazir Stackhouse, Malachi Starks. You've got a ton of guys on the defense. On the offensive line, Tate Ratledge, Trevor Etienne transferring in. They just have a ton of names that are going to be, playing on Sundays next year or in the coming years. So I think Georgia's the class of not only the SEC but college football, and I think there's a good chance that the playoff may have went a little bit differently last year had Georgia snuck their way in. But Texas is going to be really good for sure. I do think that there's a couple other teams that could absolutely sneak in and kind of, get in there with Georgia, get in there with Texas and compete for the conference. And Ole Miss is definitely one of them. And yeah, Ole Miss is definitely the perennial kind of
Penn State of the SEC.
Yeah, for sure. The 10-2. And we said it before, like, who are the people that are most happy about this playoff? It's Lane Kiffin, it's Marcus Freeman, it's obviously James Franklin. But if you look at the way that the schedule broke for Ole Miss, go and find me a third loss, because it feels like they have a 2-game schedule, and obviously, Kentucky at home isn't a complete pushover. At South Carolina, another pushover. Arkansas and Florida, I don't think either of them are going to be good. They go there on the road, but they have at LSU and they have Georgia at home. If you split those games, you're 11-1 in the SEC. You're going to make the playoff for sure. I think Ole Miss can be in that conversation. You get Georgia at home, so hypothetically, that's your best shot at Georgia there. And then the other team that kind of had a nice break with the schedule is Missouri. You get at Texas A&M, you get at Alabama. Not a ton else on that schedule that sends a ton of shockwaves down. If you believe in what Missouri did last year. And they return so much here. I mean, they return Brady Cook, who's been in the system for a while. Luther Burden, one of the best receivers in the country. I think Missouri they definitely have a little bit of 2024 Washington vibes. They could be a little bit of the surprise team that makes a run in the college football playoff. I think that there's definitely some similarities there.
I would agree and disagree on that Missouri thing, because Missouri was in a New Year's Six Bowl. It's not like they're going to come out of nowhere and we're going to be like, well, where was this Missouri team? Like, Drinkwitz has been nailing the recruiting for quite some time.
11-2 last year.
Yeah.
11-2.
So I wouldn't necessarily go as far as comparing them to Washington.
Well,
for sure.
Washington 2022 Washington was 11-2 the year before.
But I think they were probably further off people's radar. Like, either way, if Missouri ends up in the top 5 or 6, people will be like, why are they here? Because that's just the perception of Missouri football. I think
the same with Washington. Washington finished number 8 in the country the year before they went to the title last year, and Missouri probably finished around the same last year. I think there's a lot of parallels and similarities there, and I think the returning quarterback who's older, obviously, the receiver who's going to go top 5 to 10 in the draft. I'm not as big of an Eli Drinkwitz guy. I think that's where it kind of loses a little bit of it. Drinkwitz is a good coach, but he's not killing the board. But
I think to the Georgia schedule point, by the way, I think it's also important where what part of the season they play these teams. Like, I think it's very important to contextualize that, because in Alabama, a road game in Tuscaloosa on September 28th is going to hit much differently under a first-year head coach with a lot of transition happening than a November road game at Ole Miss or even mid-October at Texas. I think being able to get Alabama that early. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be a walkover, but I think it's worth contextualizing that because Alabama's still going to be working through some of the growing pains under the DeBoer. I think come mid-season, it'll be a well-oiled machine. It is what it is. It's Bama. May not be top of the SEC, but they'll be in contention. So I think that part of the schedule, I think, is very important when you look at these and say there's 3 really tough road games. And look, going on the road at Kentucky is not really a slouch either. That Kentucky is usually good for one of these big games, and it usually comes out of nowhere. That's what Mark Stoops just does at Kentucky. So that it wouldn't surprise me if they're competitive there. But I think that, look, it's not an easy schedule. I mean, that's for certain. I mean, having to go on the road to Kentucky, Bama, Texas, and Ole Miss, I mean, there's plenty of banana skins on the floor there where they could slip up.
I like that. Beef, over to you, staying with the schedule, staying with Georgia. Again, we're in ranking season. Everybody's got a ranking. Everybody's got a take, and that's all well and good until we get these games actually played. We're going to go off of some writing or some posts that we have. And one of the posts that I do have up in front of me is the ranking of SEC schedules in front of me. 16th being the easiest. They gave that to Missouri. Georgia's 9th. So they're saying that the schedule is a pretty easy, not pretty easy schedule, but, easier. Let's just put it that way. Where do you stand on that as far as Georgia's schedule? Now, they're plus 190 to win the SEC. Second team up will be Texas plus 320 as far as DraftKings is concerned. Where do you stand on Georgia's schedule, Beef?
Yeah, so that was actually going to be my take. I think if you're looking at this from the betting market and you're looking to place a future on Georgia, I would probably almost rather place it on them to win the national title at plus 320 than the SEC at plus 190 because you get your 3 toughest games probably of the season, like we've talked about with Texas, Alabama, and Ole Miss all on the road. So if you slip up once and just say 2 of those SEC teams go undefeated and they meet up, they're going 12-0, they're going into the SEC title game. Georgia loses one of those 3 games on the road, then they're not even getting a chance at that one. I think they're still going to get into the playoff regardless, and they'll still probably be either the most talented or the second most talented team once they get in the dance. I mean, you're getting them there at plus 320 instead of the plus 190. With the expanded playoff, at least, you're going to have at least a ticket to the dance. It's not like last year where they lost the SEC title game and were left out. So I'd say that for them. But I'd be pretty surprised if they did find a way to go win all 3 of those games on the road because I think Bama, Ole Miss, and Texas, those are all going to be top 10 matchups. And that's going to be like Ole Miss Super Bowl this year. Like this is looked at kind of as their year to break through the number 1 transfer portal class. Jackson Dart coming back. They shelled out a lot of money to some of these guys. They're expected to make some serious noise and not just be, a second seat at the table. They're supposed to compete for that SEC title this year. So I would definitely look at more so the national title ticket than the SEC ticket because plus 190, you got to go through that murderer's row of a schedule. I don't really think there's all that much value in that ticket there.
There's also a kind of a waiting game you can play after that Texas game because the thing we have to look at with Texas, I think this is really important part of the Georgia discussion. Texas has a significantly easier schedule when you just look at it and just do a quick glance through it. They only have 3 road games in the SEC, and 2 of them are Vanderbilt and Arkansas, 2 teams that we expect to be in the bottom quadrant of the SEC. The other one's A&M, and who knows what the hell is going to happen with the reigniting of that rivalry. That's probably one of the top 10 most anticipated games of the season because of that aspect. You could even pause on Georgia to win the SEC until that Texas game. Because what happens if Texas wins, right? The odds are going to shift completely in Texas's favor. And then you're putting the pressure on a Texas team that, yes, they've been near the top 10 and that they're almost there, but then they have to deal with all the pressure, right? And then you're dealing with a pissed off Georgia team. So it's I think it's also kind of maybe look throughout the balance of the schedule. And if you don't like the Georgia price now, you don't have to bet it. You don't have to. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't recommend placing a college football bet until August. But if you're looking at the schedule itself, maybe you wait until a Texas game, and if you're kind of taking a chance, maybe you bank on the roles reversing a little bit. That's again really kind of speculating on what this season may turn, and who knows how many twists it'll take before October 19th. But it's a way, if you want to get better value on Georgia, that's probably one of the ways to look at it.
One more on Georgia, and Mark, I'm going to come over to you on this one. Really surprising, because you're talking about a team that's just been dominating, and I know they didn't win the national championship, but still won an unbelievable season last year. You just expect them to lose all their coaches like year in, year out, and it didn't happen. And so it's like you're talking about a team that doesn't need this sort of luck, but here we are. Georgia, I was reading a little earlier, they are hanging on their defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, special teams and strength and conditioning coach. They did lose the defensive backs coach and a wide receiver coach, but other than that, they're one of the very few teams in the SEC and college football in general, if we're speaking about the other conferences, to keep those four major coaches together. That's a huge deal for Georgia to at least give them a little advantage over the other teams, correct?
Well, I think that the big reason for that, and it's pretty simple, is just we were talking about it with Saban leaving, with Harbaugh leaving, with Jimbo being fired. There's three coaches left in college football who have a ring. Kirby Smart is one of those, is only one of those guys, and he's got multiple. So he can go to the board. He can go to the people who control the NIL money at Georgia and be like, hey, look at these. No one else has them. No one else in the country has these rings. Mac Brown, Carolina, it's not.
Wow.
Kirby runs.
Who the third was. I was wondering who the third was. I couldn't come up with it. So Dabo and Mac.
Yep.
Yeah, and Dabo's 5 years past his prime at this point. He doesn't even want to admit that the transfer portal exists.
Yeah, Dabo's still operating in 2015.
Yeah. So it's really Kirby is really the only competitive coach in the country who has a ring, and Kirby's the only guy who can go to his board and be like, "Hey, remember when you paid for XYZ? We brought a ring home when that happened. Let's do it again. Let's keep all these guys. Let's keep Carson Beck. Let's keep, whoever you want to say, all the players' names, all the coaches. Georgia's, they're able to pony up. They also don't have to worry about Kirby leaving. Kirby's not really coming back and asking for, $50 million more every year like he's Lane Kiffin. So there's a lot of security there with Kirby in Georgia.
That's interesting. I did not know that little nugget right there. We're pro nugs here on this
most powerful man in college football, Kirby Smart.
I like that. All right, let's keep it moving. And you know what, Beef? I'll come over to you. Question number 2 here. Let's get this going off of Georgia. And as I said, look, you look at what took place last year in the SEC. We brought up Missouri. Tennessee looked good down the stretch. We know what they have coming back this year. In the West Division, you had Ole Miss, you had LSU do some big things, possibly some other teams that could be making a move here. I was reading an article earlier today about South Carolina and all the recruits that they have. The 6 Gamecocks are named the Phil preseason All-SEC.
Okay, sure.
Hey,
sure.
Okay. About a Phil Steele SEC preseason team, Joe Tansey.
Yeah,
Shane Beamer washed.
Shane Beamer also was supposed to do like miracles with Rattler. I mean, don't let the big attraction on South Carolina is gonna be Harbor. They're a freak athlete who's like an all-world track guy too. But I mean, South Carolina football.
All right. No, you're right.
Jake Garcia is not walking through that tour.
Look at you. All right, Beef. And then we'll get over to Tansey on this one.
Steven Garcia. I'm sorry. Steven Garcia.
A few SEC teams, not Georgia here. They all had solid season last year. Which team do you see continuing to build off of last season's success? If you had to give me one again, Georgia to the side.
I think Missouri is definitely the team that jumps off the page there. And then you coupled that with what you were just saying about the easiest schedule, them having the easiest schedule in the SEC. I think there's a good argument too that Burden and Cook are going to be the arguably the top quarterback wide receiver duo in the entire conference. Those guys are going to light it up. And I was talking, I think it was to you, Mark, a couple days ago, that Georgia game like 2 years ago where Missouri was just like a dud. They were like 4-4 or something. And Georgia went in there, and Missouri took them to the brink. Georgia pulled away with the win, but that was just one of those games where it was like, all right, you can see what they're building. It's coming here down in Columbia. Last year, they catapulted that into a really good season. And then this year, I think with the returning production, another year of continuity in a system, 15-1, and with the easiest schedule in the SEC, I think that's a pretty decent look at a ticket there as well. I think, like I said, that offense is going to be really high powered. It's going to be a really fun, exciting team to watch. And to what Joe said as well, you're going to see Missouri at number 5 in the country at one point in the year and be like, where the hell did this come from? Where did these guys come from? So love the Tigers this year.
My concern with Missouri, and this is kind of just an overall SEC topic. Do we get Kentucky syndrome with them? Because how many years have we done it with Kentucky, where they've got a really easy schedule? They play nobody in the first month. They end up, the breaks go their way and they're somehow 8-9-0 in November, and then they play somebody difficult and they crumble to pieces. And to Mark's point about he's not a huge fan of Drinkwitz. Well, is that what we're going to end up with Missouri, or are they above that? Because I look at the schedule, and yes, it's very easy. You play 3 of the final 5 on the road at Bama, who at that point you think is going to be in decent shape, and then at South Carolina, at Mississippi State, which are easy on paper, but we all know how November in college football plays with an inexperienced team that doesn't handle that moment. Like, are they above Kentucky syndrome, or can they be in that category? Because that's what Kentucky has made a living under Mark Stoops. 8-0 by November, they lose a game they're not supposed to, and they fall off. I don't think so, but at least on paper, it feels like it could be that way.
I
don't think Kentucky's ever had a Luther Burden, though, to turn to, where things shake right. If they have a season that we're talking about, he's going to be in the Heisman conversation as well. He's a game-changing player and can touch the ball pretty much on every down if he wants to, because they'll hand him the ball as well. So I think the talent is just a little bit notch above, but I definitely see what you're saying. It's kind of hard to commit to a new team in the SEC when you're so used to just Bama, Georgia, LSU predominantly dominating. Now you throw Texas in there as well. It's definitely going to be difficult. And like we said, it would be shocking to a lot of people, but I guess that's what we're here for, to kind of put them into the picture before.
Well, I think the key for them, and why I think I kind of make them similar to Kentucky, is the running game was so good last year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, Burden's very good, Cook is very good, but like the reason why they were so effective on offense in all assets is because I forget the running back's name. It was like Schaefer.
Cody Schrader
was so good. Like
the D2 guy.
Yeah, can you replicate that as well?
Of course, he wound up on the 49ers. Once McCaffrey goes down, he's going to be a 1,000-yard rusher.
All I know is Burden had a hell of a year last year. 86.
Oh, he was phenomenal.
1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns.
He was a top 5 recruit.
And Cook had a really efficient year as well. Cook was incredibly efficient in that system. I agree with Beef. I don't think Kentucky ever had a Burden. They've had a couple. They had Lynn Bowden. Exciting. Lynn Bowden was exciting. Wandale Robinson was exciting.
But Kentucky never threw the ball.
That's true.
They always ran the ball. That was always their biggest strength. And there were guys like Chris Rodriguez. You name
Benny Snell.
Benny Snell. Yeah.
I mean, Benny Snell was on the fringe of a Heisman conversation.
But the other reason of that is Kentucky has relied. So I was actually just listening to Josh Pate talk about it. Kentucky's relied so heavily on the portal for quarterbacks, even before the portal was really even such a huge topic. Kentucky has not really developed QBs in Stoops' era. It's not something he's been interested in. He's kind of just wanted to transfer in the best guy he can get. He did it with Levis, did it with Leary. Whereas Missouri, Cook has kind of been molded in this Drinkwitz system. I wouldn't be in on Missouri if two things weren't true. If they didn't have the Cook-Burden combo back with the same head coach, and if they didn't have the way that I did it, I sent you guys. I have 8 teams in the SEC that I think are going to win 9+ games. I counted how many of those teams each SEC team played. Missouri and Ole Miss are the only 2 teams that played only 2 of those 8, and Missouri only played 2 of them. It's Texas A&M and Bama. I don't know where the third loss is. I'm really low on Oklahoma. I'm sure we'll talk about that, but I don't know where the third loss is. So my whole thing is I think 10-2 I think they're going to be 10-2 if they stay healthy. So
do they make the playoff if they're 10-2 and everybody else is like so that's
the interesting part,
right? Because like
if they split though, if they go 11-1, they will. But if they
if any team goes 11-1, you're in the playoff.
Yeah,
without a doubt, especially in the SEC or Big Ten. But if they're 10-2 and look, we're talking on June 11th about this being the easiest schedule. Does it come back to haunt them? I mean, I'm just looking for future topics come November because this is what they're going to pick apart.
Well, I love that.
One wins.
Plus 175 Missouri right now. Missouri to make the playoffs, plus 175. Joe, you had the mic, over to you. Again, give us a team that and not name Georgia or Missouri if you want to agree with Beef. But who else is catching your attention right now in the SEC if you had to pick a team?
I don't think it fits kind of the parameters you set, but I think Tennessee might be the most fascinating team in the SEC because we talked so much about 2 years ago about this team being incredible and maybe the next big challenger to the Alabamas and Georgias of the world. And they took a gigantic step back last year compared to where they were 2 years ago. So now you have Nico Amialava coming in now.
Say it again. Say it again, because that's the name. That's the name right there.
I don't have the pronunciation down yet. I know it's Amialava or something like that.
Yeah, there you go. Nico,
yeah. That's what we're going to know him by.
He's a stud.
So the progression that he makes in this offense is going to be so vital to their overall success this season, right? Because we know what Josh Heupel likes to do. He's not changing, and I think that's a good thing. So can your 5-star quarterback recruit end up being what he's supposed to be? Or is it going to take another year for him to be that guy? Because, I mean, the amount of pressure that's on him right now to be successful is just insane.
Most Peyton, right?
I would probably, given where the program is. I mean, I think you could make an argument that he has the most pressure on him of any quarterback in the country.
Ooh.
Like given the circumstances of Tennessee, the Tennessee fan base, they're not going to sit and watch another season go by with all this hype and this system that they run. Like the expectations just don't work that way in Knoxville. I mean, they don't work that way pretty much everywhere in the SEC. But I feel like them, and it doesn't fit because they definitely weren't good last year.
No,
but they have to take a step.
They win the bowl game. Did they win the bowl game or lose?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they smoked Iowa.
Yeah, 35-0.
Yeah,
35.
You can build off of that success. He is the truth. I love it because hey,
but he has to be the guy though, because if he's not, I mean, the pitchforks will come out for Heupel.
You think so?
That's how college football works. I mean, he set an incredibly high standard for himself 2 years ago.
By beating Bama.
So that, I mean, not just beating Bama, but like being close to the playoff and having that, like, that's.
I just hope Tennessee remembers what it was like for them pre-Heupel. Because, man, they would have been begging for 11-2 and 9-4.
But that's how perspectives switch like that. And it's not just college football. I mean, it's everything. I mean, take, for example, like, I'm a Braves fan. They're how many games over 500? They're probably the sixth best team in the majors, and the world's on fire because they're not performing to the standard that they set last year. I mean, it's the same way. The Union have done the same way locally. They were so good in 2022, so now everybody thinks that's what they should be and what they should look like, and that's just not realistic. And I think it applies to Tennessee football in this case, where 2 years ago, it was an astronomical rise. Last year, it was more of a reality check. So which one is the real reality under Josh Heupel? We don't know yet.
I like that. That's going to be a promo. Mark Henry Jr. over
too.
One more time, Beef.
I said I think Oklahoma kind of fits in there too, where they were a playoff team with Lincoln there. And ever since Venables has came in, they've gone downhill now. Going to the SEC, and they're rolling in a quarterback with not a lot of experience there, and Arnold as well. So I think they're kind of right there with Tennessee in terms of, especially with young quarterbacks as well, going to have some pressure on them. But I think Venables has a ton of pressure. If that team goes 7-5 this year in the SEC, why bring him back for another year? I think you're better off kind of starting over, because you go 7-5 this year. I think you're, instead of being Oklahoma, where your expectations are like 11-1 to 12-0, you're going to be a perennial 7-5 to 8-4 type team.
Mark Henry Jr. has them as 6-6, and the floor is yours, Mark. You can give me your take on Oklahoma, but also give me the team that is catching your eye, not named Georgia, not named Missouri, not named Tennessee.
I mean, other than that, it would be Ole Miss, which I already kind of laid out. So I won't talk too much about it. Tennessee is all Nico. It's all dependent on how in you are on Nico. Is he a Heisman candidate? If you're in on Tennessee and you think Nico's the truth, probably just bet Nico to win the Heisman. Honestly, that's probably the best way to get some early action on it and watch how the defense
plus 1,800
the rest of the team. It's interesting. I thought it would actually be. I thought you'd get some juicier odds there, but people are in on Nico. People are riding the Nico trains. But Oklahoma, this schedule, and I think there's been a lot of attention paid to Florida's schedule, which is nightmarish. There's a couple SEC schedules that are nightmarish, but man, this Oklahoma one, and I'll chop off the first 7 weeks, which, by the way, has Tennessee and Texas on it. So not like an easy first 7 weeks for Oklahoma. You close the year at Ole Miss. You come home to play Maine. I think they'll win that one against Maine. But after that one, you have at Missouri, Alabama at home, at LSU. You get Ole Miss, Missouri, Bama, and LSU as 4 of your last 5 games. Welcome to the SEC, Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma will, 6-6. They could go worse than that. It could be an absolute catastrophe, in my opinion. I'm not a Venables guy.
Is that one of those things where Oklahoma is going to wish, things weren't so bad in the Big 12?
Oh yeah.
I mean, look,
Yeah.
It
They would probably be running the Big 12.
Right. I mean, look, it completely changes if this conversation, if Oklahoma has a decent start under Venables. I mean, we have this, we would be having this exact same conversation about Texas if they had 8 wins last year. Because then we're like, oh, you're playing a much tougher schedule. Like, I really do think like the courses of Texas and Oklahoma and their programs really has a lot to do with entering the SEC now. How many 10 years ago, whenever it was at this point, it was like, okay, we have to be there. Our programs are the elite of the elite. Well, now, I mean, you maybe wish the grass wasn't greener if you're them.
Well, yeah, they're going to have to earn their keep because, like I said, the realignment just opens your eyes so much. And the addition of these teams, and you're already just dealing with the best of the best in the SEC. So good luck. Welcome to the party, Oklahoma. All right, let's keep it moving here. We're going to go about 40 minutes. We're at about 37 right now. We'll probably go about 43 minutes here. Let's hit the fast forward button. I want to talk some quarterbacks. Everybody loves quarterbacks. Best quarterback in the SEC. Joe Tansey, who's the best quarterback in the conference in your mind?
Well, let's say Jackson Dart.
That's what I had.
Ooh.
I mean,
why? Make the case.
It's got to be just the way that he plays in that offense, right? Because if you look at, I mean, I think it's either him or Quinn Ewers preseason, number one, right? The reason I would put Carson Beck probably third on that list is Georgia's going to rely a lot on that running game. They always have. And bringing in ETN from Florida, I mean, how do you let that happen if you're the Gators? I mean, what a move that is. So I think that's why I'm kind of just not completely in on Beck being number one, just because of how they're actually going to play this year. Dart's going to have the ball in his hands all the time. That's how Ole Miss plays. Quinn Ewers is going to be very important to Texas as well. But I think Carson Beck, I think we maybe see the progression throughout the year and come late October, early November, like, oh, wow, his numbers are that good. But I don't think it's going to be right away. I think out of the chute, it's got to be either Dart or Ewers. And I'd probably lean Dart, but I don't know. It feels like a toss-up between the two.
Is there anybody who wants to add a name into the mix?
I'd give Jalen Milroe a seat at the table. I think over the second half of last year, the kind of improvement that he showed as he got more comfortable as a starter, and we're just talking in this term strictly college quarterbacks. So I think what he does at the college level is certainly, good enough to entertain that with the rushing. But I'm very interested to see what the Bama offense looks like with him playing quarterback this year. Because we know last year how much they like to throw it around the yard with Penix. Jalen Milroe only threw for over 300 yards one game last season. Yep. So if he's going to be asked to throw the ball a ton more, then we might be having a different conversation come October, come November. Is he even the quarterback if they struggle and they are looking to be a pass heavy attack? But I mean, he had a handful of games. I think he had 6 or 7 games last year where he had over 15 rushing attempts. Like they depended on his legs so much for Bama last year, and he was pretty electric down the stretch. I think he was an awesome quarterback. That Auburn play was one of the great college football highlights of the year, even in the past decade, I think. But I think he's a terrific talent, but I'm interested to see his fit with DeBoer.
You need more of the good to be good and less of you have to eliminate the bad with Milroe. If the great of Milroe is there 95% of the time, Bama's in great shape. But if that 10, 15% margin of error is there, he doesn't compare to everybody else in the SEC right now.
I know it's not saying much because of how bad LSU's defense was last year, but that LSU game, 15-23, 219 yards, that's all you got to do passing. Then he goes and he rushes for 20 yards, 20 carries, 155 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Like that's what he can bring to you. But I do think they're going to ask him to throw the ball around the yard a little bit more. And like you said, Joe, that's where he might get exposed a little bit. But if he goes out and he does play well in that system, no question, he could elevate himself into one of the, maybe the Jaden Daniels of last season.
Yeah. I mean, his ceiling's super high.
Yeah.
I went with Dart too, but Carson Beck did have the most passing yards of these guys. He had 3,900. Ewers, Dart, and Cook were kind of all around that same 3,300, 3,400 level. Dart adds the most with his legs of those 4, which is why I went with Dart. Milroe would be right behind them, and then Nico's kind of like the wild card guy.
I think we looked down on Beck a little bit just because of what we saw like Stetson Bennett do, Jake Fromm do. It's like, oh, he's just another guy in the system. But yeah, I do think he's the best of that bunch for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The Milroe stat here, he led the country last year, 26 scrambles for a first down, including 4 that led to a touchdown. So yeah, we know the athleticism is through the roof for him, but he is going to have to make a couple passes, and we'll see. Good. He was young, right? The evolution. What year is he in right now, as far as Milroe is concerned?
I think it'll be his junior year. Might be like a redshirt junior, but it's only his second year being the full-time starter.
Also, how much talent's left around him?
Yeah.
How much does that play a role in him being one of the top quarterbacks in the SEC?
Bama's got a lot more question marks than answers heading into this year for the first time in forever.
Yeah, can't say we've ever said that before, or we haven't said it in a long dang time, like you said. All right, get you out of here on this one. We'll go around the horn. If you have one, I'd love to hear it. I'm looking for one bowl prediction in SEC play this season. Even if we already covered it, please bring it back. But one bowl prediction. I'll start with you, Mark Henry Jr. You have one for us here, sir?
Let me find the exact date. It's Billy Napier will be fired by at least November 10th.
Ooh,
November 10th? Come on, if you're gonna do bold prediction, give me October. Go up there and do it.
I'll do October 13th. They'll be 3-3 at that point. I'll do October 13th.
That's a good one. I like that, and that is
being
bold.
fired on November 10th isn't a bold prediction anymore.
Yeah, no, October is
That's
bold.
fair.
You're
That's
right.
fair.
You're right. November.
That's fair.
November is what he loses in the in the game to Georgia, and then he gets fired.
Well, that means he gets fired before the cocktail party.
Once upon a time, people were telling me how Billy Napier was this great hire for Florida.
I thought he was going to do that.
I never got it. I never got the Billy Napier thing.
I set the bar low. It wasn't like I was saying that they were going to win the SEC. Or 10 wins. I just thought, okay, this is a guy that's got a good offensive mind, good system, good quarterback, and then hasn't been able to put it together.
It's a cautionary tale for what we were talking about with Heupel in Tennessee. It's like you fired Dan Mullen for winning 9-10 games. Mm-hmm. You'd like 9-10 wins at this point consistently if you were Florida.
Joe Tansey, bold take, SEC edition.
I don't know how much of a bold take it is based off of what we've seen from this coach, but I think Mike Elko straightens Texas A&M out, and they're probably the surprise team in the SEC.
Ooh, I like that.
He's one hell of a coach, and I think the one thing they lacked with Jimbo there was just stability. Mike Elko at least gives you that. You're going to get a stable defense. The offense has to be significantly better. There's no doubt about that. But when you look at, we talk schedules, I mean, yeah, they open against Notre Dame, but then it's pretty fluffy until you get to November. Like we could have
a good word. Fluffy is a good word. I like that.
We could have an A&M team maybe sitting at probably already bowl eligibility by November, and it wouldn't surprise people based off of the way that schedule breaks. I mean, if we think Florida is going to be that bad, that's a September win for them. They play 4 at home after Notre Dame. Missouri is going to be tough. LSU will be tough, but I mean, they don't have any of the big guns until Texas at the end. I mean, I would love to see Texas A&M be one of the most competitive SEC games of the season. I think that's the one game that everybody has wanted back on the schedule for so long now. I mean, that's the one rivalry that I think has really been pulled away from us with realignment. Everybody else has found a way to work it out, but the Longhorns and the Aggies haven't. And I would love for that to be a competitive game. Maybe A&M's around that 15 to 25 spot. I think that's probably their ceiling for this season. But I would love to see something along those lines on Thanksgiving.
All right, I dig that. Over to you, Beef. Do you have a bold take SEC edition for us?
Yeah, but real quick, random side note. Why can in PA we bet on the Heisman, but we can't do like college player props? That doesn't make sense to me. But my take is I personally don't think it's that bold, but the books are saying it's bold. Luther Burden, 80-1 to win the Heisman. I think my bold prediction is that he's going to be a Heisman finalist this year. So if you're buying into what I'm selling, I think it's worth a stab there at 80-1. I think he's going to be the best receiver in college football. And we were just talking about how they might be a potential playoff team. So he'll definitely have a seat at the table for the conversation. But Luther Burden, 80-1. I think that's going to be my bold prediction. He's at least a finalist this year.
Excellent stuff, boys, all the way across the board. All things SEC Summer Ball Episode 2 edition here on The Gambler. And, man, you all made us better. That's for sure. As we continue to proceed closer. Beef, what's the countdown to? Where are we at? 74?
Yep. Today was 74.
74 till we get to Florida State and Georgia Tech in Ireland to kick off the college football season. It doesn't get any better than that.
We can just leave. We can just leave Georgia Tech over there.
You're right. Take your time. No one's trying to rush just yet. But
unless they run the option, I don't think they should be allowed back.
Go back. Yeah, exactly. Why'd they get rid of that? Joe Tansey, Mark Avery Jr., Ryan, Beef, Coyle, fantastic job across the board. We'll be back next Tuesday for episode 3, and we will focus on another conference. Again, only 4 conferences to discuss, 1 down, 3 more to go. Look forward to doing it here on the next edition of Summer Ball right here on Fox Sports Gambler.